actually say we're really going to get to a realistic mortgage on this house for this family, somebody has to acknowledge what the loss is.
Right.
Somebody who's holding the bond, the CDO, the game on up.
It
And
also-
we can just keep playing, extend and pretend, if we don't have to do that.
And dicing of these instruments has a drawback that it's extremely difficult to put them back again. Having distributed them to different people, different interests have, or different slices have different interests, and it's extremely difficult to renegotiate or to
Which is why the servicers are so frozen and are so unwilling to do anything, because they might make one tranche holder, one bondholder happy and make the other bondholder so mad that they sue them.
2 points. The first one is it's hard to do if you're going to try to do it voluntarily. It's not hard when the federal government, as it did in the 1930s, says, wait, we just need a different kind of solution for this. And the servicers have been insulated by law from most of these lawsuits. The servicers are genuinely a case of faithless agents in the middle, and that's part of the problem we've got here. Even when you might find deals that would be good for families, good for the communities, good for the economy, good for the overall real estate market, and you've got investors on the other end who say, you know, it's time, I'm ready. Let's find that number. There are servicers still in the structure we've got. Servicers are the ones who actually handled mortgage paperwork in between, grew up during this bubble. There are servicers in between who even today make more money if the family goes into foreclosure. So impose losses on both ends, not my problem when I make the money. And yet how did we build this mortgage foreclosure program? All around getting the servicers to do the right thing, offering them a bribe, money to do the right thing in the middle. And if we don't get the number high enough, they don't do it.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that too. There's a very famous statement by the Deputy Minority Leader, Deputy Majority Leader, Majority Whip, Senator Durbin of Illinois. Congress was on the verge of authorizing bankruptcy judges to modify mortgages to allow individuals to stay in their homes. And the Senate Democratic leadership thought they had enough votes to get that provision through, and they showed up at the caucus right before the vote, and I believe my figure is right, 14 Democratic senators changed their vote in the caucus, said they would not support bankruptcy judges modifying the mortgages, and the provision, it's called the cram down, mortgage cram down, the provision failed. Senator Durbin walked out of the caucus and said, the banks own this place. The bank. Now, what did he mean by that? A lot of the problems that Mr. Soros and Professor Warren have identified are correct, but if you go back to the principle that everybody who defaults triggers bets on whether or not the default would happen. And so if you have the John Paulsons of this world, the Jeff Greens of this world, who, by the way, is running for the Democratic nomination for Senate in Florida and is carrying this on his back, who have bet that these mortgages will fail without having anything to do with the mortgages, sort of fantasy baseball, without having to take your turn on picking the team. You just pick Alex Rodriguez and every star and say they're going to be great. In this case, you pick the tranches and say they're going to fail. If every default has 9 people betting that it will default, and you're talking about trillions of dollars of bets, that is a political economic constituency that doesn't want to see these people helped. And by the way, Angela Merkel, Mr. Soros, I know your aggravation with Angela Merkel, and I agree with your aggravation, but on this one, I think you and I would agree. The reason Angela Merkel is saying we don't want people betting without owning the debt, betting on countries' failures, is those institutions have formed an economic and political constituency that is denying those countries commercial loans to work their way out of these transactions. When you have Wall Street writ large, hedge funds, private equity firms, the city in London, all betting naked bets, credit default swaps.
I have to. Finally, we can find a point on which we differ.
Okay.
It's high time that we don't go too far
Okay.
in one direction. Because actually, short selling as such is a very healthy thing in the market, because it actually provides stability, because it goes against the prevailing trend, which is self-reinforcing, and when everybody is on the same track, that's when things go out of kilter. So having short positions by itself is, I think, it adds to the depth of the market, and people like Paulson fulfilled a useful function in having short positions. They made a mistake in thinking that the bubble would collapse too soon. They weren't numerous enough to stop it from growing.
I don't think you're right about that, though, because I think what actually happened was there came a point in the market where the only trade was called the magnetar trade. The magnetar trade was where a hedge fund would buy the equity, buy the lowest rated tranche, right, and short the AAAs.
Right.
Okay? And so the purchase of the equity and the shorting of the AAAs helped create a huge piece of the market that was otherwise about to fade away. In other words, they kept it going through this long-short trade. And the point of the trade was, if the AAAs retain value, you make money on the equity. And if the AAAs collapse, you lose the money on the equity, but you make a fortune on the AAAs.
Maybe, but I'm not aware of
Yeah,
that.
Mr. Soros.
But I think generally speaking, a market which allows short selling has much more resilience than a market where you can only be long. That's, for instance, emerging markets.
I agree.
Very difficult to short. And that makes them much more volatile.
But you said earlier, you must have an insurable risk.
No, on the CDS.
Yes.
On the CDS only.
Right. Well,
No,
these are
no.
naked CDS, where you are betting that Greece, Italy, Portugal, and the euro will fail without having any underlying interest. That's point number one. And point number two is, it's fine to short the market, like when you short a stock, we know the short interest. Here, this is a private, bilateral, unregulated market. Nobody knows. It can't have a positive effect if it's a hidden, dark market. In other words, it's not sending the positive signals that you want to have put into the market.
I think that when CDS are used for a bear raid, they can actually change the fundamentals which are supposed to be reflected in market prices. I mean, this is what I call reflexivity, that false perceptions or false mispricing of financial assets can actually change the fundamentals which the assets are supposed to price. That's an important point. But having the ability to be on both sides of a market actually adds to the stability of the market. So this is why I had to make that point, that we shouldn't sort of go overboard and, let's say, ban short selling altogether, as for instance Angela Merkel actually did. She also forbade the short selling of bank shares. Now, you know, banks are, the European banks, are way undercapitalized. So if they are